In the midst of a time when society was defined by segregation and inequality in ways we could hardly comprehend today, there was a quiet revolution happening behind the scenes of the greatest scientific achievement of the 20th century. There were women working long hours with little recognition whose brilliance would change the course of history. They were the hidden figures of NASA. They were the mathematicians and engineers whose work helped launch the first man to the moon. They were the forgotten heroes of the space race. They were black women whose dreams were bigger than the limits placed upon them, and they refused to let the walls of discrimination keep them from reaching for the stars. These are the stories of Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, three women whose names should echo in every classroom and whose legacies should be written in every history book. It's the early 1960s. The Cold War is at its height, and the United States and the Soviet Union are locked in a battle for supremacy in space. The race to the moon is on. But while the world is focused on rocket launches and countdowns, there are quiet voices at NASA's Langley Research Center in Virginia, making it all possible. The quiet voices of black women, whose work was far too often ignored or dismissed because of their gender and the color of their skin. Katherine Johnson was a mathematician whose ability to calculate the trajectory of spacecraft was nothing short of genius. When NASA decided to launch John Glenn into orbit, they turned to Katherine to verify the calculations that would guide his spacecraft safely around the Earth and back again. In an era before computers, she did the work by hand. Her calculations were flawless. She calculated the flight path that took Glenn around the world and helped safely bring him back down to Earth. But at the time there were no accolades, there were no ceremonies, there was just the work and the quiet acknowledgement from Glenn himself, who said, "If she says the numbers are right, then I'm going to fly." Dorothy Vaughan was a brilliant mathematician and the first black woman to become a supervisor at NASA Langley. But her journey was not easy. She started as a mathematician in the segregated spaces of NASA's computing pool, and eventually led the team of women who worked tirelessly on the complex calculations needed for space missions. She was a pioneer of the computer age when the first electronic computers arrived at NASA. She taught herself and her team how to program them, turning the work of these human computers into the work of machines. She saw the future of technology before anyone else and helped her team evolve with it. Without Dorothy Vaughan, NASA's transition to computer programming might have taken much longer, and the United States' ability to compete with the Soviets in space may have been jeopardized. She did all of this with grace and determination, even when the world around her tried to hold her back. Mary Jackson was an engineer who dreamed of one thing above all else: becoming the first black female engineer at NASA. But the road was not easy. Her path was filled with obstacles. At every turn she was told she needed additional classes to earn the title of engineer, but the classes were offered at a whites-only school, so Mary Jackson took matters into her own hands. She petitioned the courts for permission to take the courses she needed, and when she was finally able to enroll, she became the first black woman to earn the title of engineer at NASA. Her work would go on to shape the future of aeronautics and space exploration. Her contributions were instrumental in the design and development of many of NASA's most important spacecraft. These three women were part of a team that made history. They worked alongside engineers, scientists, and astronauts in a world where their contributions were often overlooked or unrecognized. Yet, without them, the mission to the moon would never have succeeded. Their stories are a testament to the power of perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity. They show us what it means to push beyond the barriers that are set before us and to reach for something greater than ourselves. Their lives were not easy. Their challenges were real, but their determination was unmatched. They faced racism, they faced sexism, and they faced the weight of a world that tried to tell them they were not enough. They were told their work didn't matter. They were told their dreams were too big, but they kept going. They worked in rooms where the only other women were their fellow black women. They broke barriers in silence, and with grace. Their impact was monumental, but their stories were left out of history for too long. The world finally started to see them for who they were in the 2010s when their story was brought to the public through the book and film Hidden Figures. It was a moment of recognition, a moment of redemption. But for Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, their true triumphs were not in the accolades they received at the end of their careers or in the recognition of their names, but in the knowledge that their work had changed the world. They had helped to shape history, and the future was brighter because of them. We often look at the moon and think of the astronauts who first walked on its surface. We celebrate Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as if they were the only ones who made that moment possible, but the truth is the journey to the moon was a collective effort. It was the result of countless men and women working together in the pursuit of something greater than themselves, and among those men and women were the hidden figures of NASA, the brilliant minds who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the success of the Apollo missions. Their work is woven into the fabric of history, even if their names were not always remembered until now. As we look back at the history of space exploration, we must remember the women who made it all possible, the women who were the first to break through the barriers of race and gender, and who showed the world what it means to be truly exceptional. We must remember Katherine Johnson, who calculated the flight path that took astronauts to the moon and brought them home safely. We must remember Dorothy Vaughan, who taught herself and her team how to program the very computers that would shape the future of space exploration. We must remember Mary Jackson, who fought for her right to become an engineer and paved the way for countless women who followed in her footsteps. Their story is not just a story of the past, it is a story that continues to inspire us today. It is a story of courage and resilience. It is a story of the power of dreams. It is a story of women who saw the impossible and made it possible. They are the hidden figures of NASA, and their legacy will live on forever in the stars they helped us reach for, and in the generations of women who will continue to break barriers and change the world in their footsteps. This is their story. This is the story of Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, the women who helped land a man on the moon and whose legacy continues to inspire us all. This script is designed to be smooth, emotional, and cinematic, perfect for a voiceover like May's. If you'd like any modifications or need help with specific sections, feel free to let me know.